everybody. Hope everyone had a wonderful week. Just a short idea. Parshas bamidbar. We have over here, the pasuk says, "V'yidaber Hashem el Moshe Rabbeinu Sinai, ba'al ma'id be'echad chad sheni." So Rashi says, "V'yidaber Rabbeinu Sinai." Rashi says, "Mitoich chibasam lefanov moine oisam kol sha'a." Rashi says that from within God's chiba to the Jewish people, He counts them all the time. K'shiyatzu Mitzrayim, when they left Egypt, manan, He counts them. K'shinafu be'egel manan, when they fell in the egel, He counts them. V'yidei b'yin resart, and all the left, who was left. K'shabal hasha shchinas aleihem, when He comes to Yemasha the Shechina upon them, mana'am, He counts them. So the Shiloh is just very, very interesting to understand. What is the definition of the word chiba? We use the generic term of endearment or, liking, but that's, it's not sufficient, obviously, because we know that term describes a range of emotions, and it just means that someone likes somebody very much. That's obviously not the pshat. You have other words in the Torah for that, like oihev, or chonein, someone has chen. It's very important to understand what exactly this idea of chiba means, and how is it expressed by the idea of counting. Now, l'chayra, we have the famous rule of Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen. And Rabbi Tzadok HaKohen, I've mentioned this a few times, says that you have to look at where the word is first mentioned in the Torah in order to get a definition. And lucky for us, it's really the word chayvev in the actual psukim, as referring to the idea of endearment generically. It's actually only mentioned once, and it's actually at the end of the Torah. And it's right over here. It says, Af chayvev amim, kol kedosha biyadecha. So it says that Hashem was chayvev the amim, and all of His holy ones came to kuli raglecha yisam midaber yisecha. They are to kuli raglecha, and it starts to say, so what is the definition of chayvev, which is the word that we're looking at here? So Rashi says, Gam chiba yasira chaba v'sashvatim. Hashem was endeared, we'll use that word for now, for the sake of the reading of it. Hashem endeared the shvatim a further endearment. Kol echad ve'echad, how so? Because every single one is karui am, is called a nation. Sheharei, that behold, Binyamin levado haya esadivad, Kshamar Kosh Baruch Yaakov, goyuk halgoyim yemimeka. So, the way that God endeared the Jewish people was that each one of the Shvatim, even though you would have said that that really there's only one Am, there's only one nation, and each of the Shvatim are just, a piece within the nation, but the Am is Yisrael altogether. So Kamash Malan come to tell you, the pasuk is going to tell you that God endeared the Jewish people by calling each Shevet an Am. And as a result of this Rashi that I'm expressing to you now, I would like to surmise, and I think rightfully so, if you follow the strain of logic here, I would like to surmise that the side of chavivus is the act or the emotional stance or view on somebody which gives them, in your mind, a high sense of individuality. Another way to say it is, you have an appreciation of the uniqueness of what they are in contrast to everyone else around them. Now, the way that I am getting to this conclusion is that, as you see in front of you, Rashi says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is chayvev b'nei Yisrael, because, and as we've talked about this in the past, Obviously, each of the 12 Shvatim exist on identity levels in several different in several different ways. So, as someone who is from Shevet Yehuda, there is the specificity of how the Jewish people nowadays express themselves as being a chelik of the Shevet of Yehuda. That has certain traits, that has certain characteristics, and as being a Jew is another set of characteristics. For example, let's say Yehuda is compared to an Ari, a lion. So Yehuda is that is implications of aggressiveness. He's a gibor. He's very strong. A lot of physical strength. There is something goes in there, and then we have stam generic Yisrael, they say kol she'eni migam lechasadim, and if you're not gam chesed and you're not a baishan, then you're not part of Yisrael. So there's characteristics that make you and are expressions of the fact that you are a Jew on the generic Yisrael level, and then there is more individual expressions of an identity that belong to a shevet, and then as it obviously the more it goes down to mishpacha, and it goes down to your individual unique self. So those are the levels of generality and specificity that people's identities exist on. They all exist simultaneously, but the simple idea of chayvev is that what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing is he's saying that we have to understand what is the significance of HaKadosh Baruch Hu being moneh, the Jewish people counting them. What does it really mean? When you count something, what you're doing is you are giving it attention for its own sake, on its own level. So you say, this is the first one, the second one, the third one. What are you doing there? You're saying, this one matters, this one matters, this one matters. In other words, they're each separate. And that's why you're counting them all. And what you end up having is, a lot of different, people and a lot of different things. Now, when that applies to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu, quote unquote, counts, what does that mean? So, the parshas, we understand that, obviously, although we speak out these terminologies of God and Hashem and etc., but on the most real level, the way that we would relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is that God is the ultimate sense of being, existing. In other words, God is really the only thing that exists. That's the concept of Einod Milvado. And therefore, one could understand that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives attention to something, or he's moneh it, essentially what he is saying is that the level on which he is counting, and the level in which HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives something attention, it means that that level of existence that it has is vital and crucial to reality. That's what it means. That I think is a very intuitive understanding of what it would mean that God, quote unquote, gives attention to something or counts it. And therefore, one shouldn't say that a person's individual identity is only as a hechsher, is only as a stepping stone to be part of the greater general klal, and therefore really only his identity as a general Jew that matters. Not only that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mechavev you. It means that he gives attention to a more specific part of what you are, and when it comes to Klal Yisrael, it gives attention to every single individual. And what that means is that every single individual on the level that he is individual, in other words, that there's a significance to the contribution that an individual person makes on the level that he is only the person that he is, that also is integral and has a basis in reality. It's not just a hechsher for a greater thing. And it's as vital as his identity as a yid to the plan of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the world and to existence. And it matters, and it's valid, and it exists. And that is the idea of being chayv somebody. And the other way to really think about it is that, if you think about it in terms of marriage dynamics, or really general relationship dynamics, the closer that you get to somebody, the more that you begin to notice little things about them that you know are unique to them. And the reason why that is because there is an inherent idea that, why did I choose this person? Once I did choose this person, what essentially is happening is that I am giving attention to her or him in contrast to anybody else, which means that I can now begin to appreciate and realize what is unique about him or her. And this is true Ma'aseh b'chol yom. Whenever we look at people, for most people, especially the ones that we don't know, we just create labels and we say he fits in that label, and mistama, that's the level of idea of knowledge that we have of that person. But the people who mean more to us, we know more about them, we think more about them, we see more unique things about them, and we can describe them in a way which separates them from everybody else around them, and that is because we have chosen to invest in them in contrast to everybody else around them. Therefore, we must and we do see those details, and that is exactly what Kadosh Baruch Hu is doing with the Jewish people. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said he made a bris with us, and he said that he's committed to loving us and being in a relationship with us forever. And B'meila, he has a level of relationship to us which is chiba, and the level of chiba that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has to us is proportionate to the reality of the fact that he has knowledge of us and he cares about us as individual people, and that is the very vital, important message of bamidbar. And if we want to get a little bit more drashtic in this idea, we can further expand and say that, as we know, Chazal Darshan, that you can't be kind to Torah unless you put yourself like a midbar, or make yourself like a desert, which has nothing in it. And it's very humble, very low, very unique. And as obviously we see here in the pasuk, which I tapped to define chiba, that very pasuk says, "Veheim tukul reglecha," and you know why Hakadosh Baruch Hu is mechavev them? Because they were tukul reglecha. They were uyim lekach because they put themselves under Hakadosh Baruch Hu's legs, so to speak, at the bottom of Har Sinai, which essentially speaks to the concept which we know is very understood and very relevant to Shavuos, which is that the Gemara says that Akol Moedim, everyone agrees that on Shavuos Ba'inan Lachem, we require time for yourself. And what does that mean? That means that there's a machlekes in the rest of holidays, Yantiv, Sukkot, Pesach, if you're supposed to devote the time to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to daven and to learn for the most of the day, or are you supposed to devote it to yourself and to enjoy and eat and drink and have a good time? And there's machlekes in the rest of the holidays, but on Shavuos, everyone agrees that you need to have time for yourself and to enjoy yourself and to have pleasure, etc., etc. And the reason for that is the Gemara makes it clear in many places, is very intuitive. Because the Gemara says that Rabbi Yossi said, fatten me a egla tilsa. I'm not going to bring up the lashon now, but it says, fatten me an egla tilsa. Give me a cow that came out third from its mother's womb, because they were the best. And he said, you know why? Because ilav Torah. If it wouldn't be for Torah, kama Yosef ike b'shuka. There's many Yosefs all around in the marketplace. So essentially, what that shows you, what that tells you is, and this is the beginning of the integration of the chavivus with the concept of bamidbar, and therefore the concept of tukul raglecha, which is that we put ourselves at the bottom of God's feet, and that is that true learning of Torah, what it does to a person is it gives him, and we discussed this many times, it gives him the barometers within which to define himself, and he has to, like we said, that ain't Torah, you're not going to Torah unless you're meimis atzmai, unless you kill yourself over it, which we explained in the past means that a person has to completely strip himself of all assumptions and preconceived notions that come with the way that he was raised or the way that he thinks up until that point, in order to allow for the Torah to redefine him and make it that he is now someone who is defined only by the way that the Torah shows that he should be. And Memela, once one has done that, then his own sense of how he views himself, his individual self, is tied directly to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Torah, and therefore HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mechavev him on the individual level in which he exists.